Thanksgiving had always been my favorite holiday. Not for the turkey or the stuffing, not for the pumpkin pies that Mom baked with obsessive precision, but for the ritual of being surrounded by the people I called family. The warmth, the laughter, the unspoken understanding that no matter what happened in the outside world, we had each other. At least, that's what I thought. This year I had been looking forward to it more than ever. Work had been brutal, life a series of relentless disappointments, and I needed something to anchor me, something familiar and comforting. I imagined the drive up to Mom's house, the familiar smells of cinnamon and roasting turkey, the way Dad would pull me aside and whisper some ridiculous joke that made everyone groan and laugh at the same time. I imagined myself surrounded by chatter, the chaos of cousins running around, the smell of pies cooling on the counter, the soft clinking of wine glasses, and the gentle hum of contentment that came with feeling included, but all of that shattered in a single text. Hey, just so you know, we're leaving for Thanksgiving next week. You don't have to worry about coming this year. Love you. I stared at my phone, willing the words to rearrange themselves into some kind of misunderstanding. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe they meant to invite me and just forgot. I reread it. No, it was perfectly clear, perfectly deliberate. And then the whispers began, subtle digs from family group chats and social media posts I wasn't supposed to see. It's probably better if they stay home. Someone wrote, another added, they never fit in anyway. A meme, innocuous on the surface, flashed across my screen, a smiling turkey with the caption, some people just shouldn't come to dinner. I could feel the heat rising to my cheeks, an ache twisting in my chest that was both humiliation and disbelief. How could they exclude me and then act as though I were the problem? The people who had promised to be my sanctuary, my home base, had decided I wasn't welcome. And the worst part, they didn't even bother to tell me in person. I sat on the edge of my bed, the text glowing on my phone, my fingers numb, my heart hammering in a way that felt physical. I wanted to scream, to call them, to demand answers, but what would I even say? Why am I not good enough for Thanksgiving? Somehow, that question felt both too big and too small. I was angry, yes, but beneath it was a deep, gnawing sadness that I wasn't part of something that was supposed to be sacred. The night stretched on, and I scrolled through old photos of previous Thanksgivings. There I was, smiling, holding a plate of mashed potatoes, the laughter in my eyes genuine. It felt like a different lifetime. The memories, once comforting, now mocked me. They were proof of a bond I had believed existed, and yet, here I was, excluded without ceremony or explanation. And as the initial shock faded, a quieter, sharper emotion settled in, anger. Not the fleeting kind that passes with a night's sleep, but a simmering, deliberate anger. I wasn't going to break down and cry, not yet. Something in me clicked. If they thought they could cast me aside and label me selfish for being absent, they hadn't counted on me noticing the sharp edges of their own hypocrisy. Tonight, the betrayal was raw. Tomorrow, perhaps, I would find a way to show them exactly what selfish really meant. The morning after I received that text, I woke up to the hollow quiet of an apartment that suddenly felt colder than usual, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones not from the weather, but from betrayal. I poured myself a cup of coffee, the steam fogging my glasses, and tried to convince myself it was just a misunderstanding. Maybe someone had made a mistake. Maybe Mom would call later and laugh about it. She didn't. Instead, I found myself scrolling through the family chat again, like a moth drawn to a flame I knew would burn. That's when I saw it, the full cost of their Thanksgiving extravaganza. $15,000, $15,000 on flights, hotel suites, catering, decorations, wine, and gifts. I had to scroll twice to make sure I wasn't misreading it. $15,000 for a holiday I wasn't allowed to attend. The number hit me like a punch to the stomach. $15,000 that could have been spent to help me, spent to show me I mattered, spent to include me in a family tradition that was supposed to be sacred. And yet here it was, an obscene monument to my exclusion, and then came the messages. We're doing this for the whole family, not for you. You're being selfish. Selfish. The word dug into me like glass, me. I had spent years helping out, lending money, picking up errands, babysitting cousins, driving people to the airport, listening to endless complaints about trivial things I didn't care about. I had done everything to be part of this family, and now I was being punished for being absent from a trip I had no invitation to. The anger started to simmer slowly, quietly, like water heating before it boils. It wasn't just anger, it was the realization of hypocrisy, of injustice. They called me selfish for staying home, but what about their selfishness? Their lavish spending, their exclusionary behavior, the way they assumed I wouldn't understand their world because I wasn't invited. They were twisting reality, painting me as the villain while they basked in luxury. I tried to calm myself, I really did. I paced my apartment, muttering under my breath, imagining confrontations that would never happen. But the more I thought about it, the more I felt a strange satisfaction in the idea that perhaps they needed a taste of the same chaos they had inflicted on me. I didn't want to ruin them, well, not entirely. I wanted them to feel the discomfort of realizing that not everyone can be ignored without consequence. By the afternoon, the simmering anger had hardened into something sharper, colder, strategy. I started thinking about how I could disrupt their perfect holiday without causing permanent damage. A frozen account here, a delayed reservation there, a gentle nudge that might make them squirm. I didn't want revenge born from spite. I wanted justice born from reflection. They needed to see, just for a moment, what it felt like to be the one excluded, the one treated as selfish for being absent. And as I sat back in my chair, staring at the holiday group chat, I realized something that sent a thrill through my chest. This wasn't just about money, or a trip, or even Thanksgiving. This was about respect, about being seen, about reclaiming the dignity that had been so casually stripped from me. For the first time since reading that initial text, I smiled. Not a warm, forgiving smile, but a quiet, deliberate one. They had called me selfish. Maybe it was time I redefined what selfish really meant. By the time the weekend rolled around, my plan had taken shape with a clarity that felt almost intoxicating. I wasn't going to confront them with anger or tears. That would have been too obvious, too easy to dismiss. No, this had to be subtle, precise, a lesson in irony that would make them squirm without them ever fully knowing why. I had access to the shared family accounts, a convenience I had always thought of as mundane. Splitting costs, paying for tickets, managing reservations. It had seemed routine, nothing that required thought. But now, that routine was my weapon. With a few clicks, I discovered I could temporarily freeze the $15,000 bill for their lavish Thanksgiving trip. Flights would be on hold, hotels wouldn't confirm, even the catering could be delayed if they didn't act quickly. $15,000 of careful planning, suddenly caught in limbo. I waited, not long, just long enough to make it noticeable. Then I sent a single cryptic message. Hope everyone enjoys Thanksgiving. Maybe take a moment to think about what it means to be truly selfless. Almost immediately, the panic began. Texts started pouring in. Why is the payment on hold? Did anyone else authorize this? We can't check in until this is resolved. The family chat exploded, a flurry of accusations and frantic phone calls. My heart pounded as I watched the unraveling, a slow-motion spectacle of the chaos they had once imposed on me. And yet I didn't gloat out loud. I watched from a distance, savoring the irony. Their voices rose in tension over Zoom calls and voice memos, each one more frantic than the last. They couldn't understand who could do such a thing, and the realization that it could have been anyone in the trusted inner circle made them question themselves and each other. For once they weren't unified. They were scrambling, unsure, exposed. A part of me felt a strange kinship with the ghost of my younger self, the one who had sat on the bed staring at the "we're leaving without you" text. That hurt, that humiliation, had birthed this calculated act, and now it felt vindicated. I wasn't cruel, I was deliberate. I wasn't malicious, I was precise. I wasn't angry in the messy, uncontrolled way they had expected. I was calm, collected, a mirror reflecting the same selfishness they had labeled me with. Hours passed, and slowly, the messages shifted from panic to reflection. Maybe we overreacted. one cousin wrote, another admitted hesitantly, perhaps we were unfair. My lips curved into a small, private smile. They were finally considering what it felt like to be excluded, to be left out, to be labeled unfairly. Finally, I lifted the freeze, allowing the payments to go through. Nothing was permanently damaged, no irreparable harm done. And yet the lesson was delivered. I didn't need to speak, the tension, the uncertainty, the fear of their own misjudgment. It all spoke louder than words ever could. That night, as I poured myself a glass of wine, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I wasn't just a passive observer of my own exclusion anymore. I had agency. I had reminded them, quietly, subtly, that actions have consequences, that labels like selfish carry more weight when wielded carelessly. And somewhere in that chaos, I found something I hadn't expected. Not triumph, not malice, but a calm satisfaction. I wasn't just reacting anymore, I was asserting myself, and for the first time since Thanksgiving had begun, I felt seen. The morning after the chaos, I woke to an unusual silence. The apartment felt warmer somehow, lighter, as though the tension that had been coiled inside me for weeks had finally unspooled. I poured myself a cup of coffee and scrolled through the family chat, not out of obsession, but curiosity. The messages were quieter now. The panic had faded into sheepish apologies and awkward reflections. Maybe we should have included them. One cousin typed, hesitating over each word. We never thought it would hurt like this. Another chimed in. We acted selfishly. We didn't consider their feelings at all. A small, ironic smile tugged at my lips. They were finally seeing what it meant to be excluded, even if only in a fleeting moment. For years, I had endured the silent judgments, the snide comments, the subtle sidelining that left me questioning my worth. Now the mirror had shifted. They were staring at their own reflection, and it was uncomfortable. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. There was no joy in humiliation, only clarity. This was never about revenge for revenge's sake. It was about reclaiming my dignity and showing them, and myself, that I was not someone to be disregarded so easily. For too long, I had let their definition of selfish dictate how I saw myself. But now I realized something important. Their labels were meaningless if I refused to accept them. I took a deep breath, feeling a lightness I hadn't known in years. For the first time, I allowed myself to think about Thanksgiving in my own terms. I didn't need their approval or their validation. I could create a holiday that honored my sense of family, of connection, of love, without their judgment or exclusion. I envisioned my own table, smaller but filled with warmth, where laughter was genuine, where people were chosen for their kindness rather than their convenience. The thought sparked a quiet excitement. I could host a Thanksgiving where inclusion wasn't conditional, where every story mattered, where everyone felt seen. And in that vision, I realized I was free not just from their judgments, but from the invisible chains of expectation that had bound me to their whims for years. Later that day, I went for a walk, letting the crisp autumn air clear my mind. Leaves crunched beneath my feet, a reminder that change is inevitable, that seasons pass, that nothing lasts forever. Not exclusion, not hurt, not even anger. I felt a profound gratitude for the clarity I had gained, the inner strength that had been awakened through adversity. They had forced me to confront my own boundaries, my own worth, and in doing so, I had discovered a resilience I hadn't realized I possessed. By evening, I found myself planning my own celebration, a small gathering of friends, neighbors, and anyone who had ever felt overlooked or underestimated. I wanted laughter that wasn't performative, conversations that weren't rehearsed, gratitude that wasn't weighed against obligation. It would be my Thanksgiving, authentic, warm, and unapologetically mine. As the sun set, casting golden light across my apartment, I realized something profound. They had called me selfish, excluded me, and tried to diminish me, but none of it had the power to define me. I had reclaimed my narrative. I had turned hurt into clarity, exclusion into liberation. And for the first time in a long while, I felt complete not because of what I had done to them, but because of what I had done for myself. And in that quiet, glowing realization, I smiled. I was free.